Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Crystal Villamin Diaz. I'm so excited to have you here with us today. And this is from an event to an experience. So a little bit about what you're going to be getting out of this session. Our goals is to help you develop and enhance your programming skills in an experiential format through creating, promoting, and implementing events through this session, as well as gain a network of peers around the country for support on event ideas, problem solving, resources, anything that you might need. Additionally, the purpose is to upgrade your typical events to an unforgettable experience. So what exactly does that mean? In an experience economy, James H. Gilmore said this: an experience is a memorable event that engages guests in an inherently personal way, but unlike a service that is rendered on demand, an experience unfolds over time. So how do we get to that point? For this presentation, we are going to be focusing on these 4 steps: ideation, pre-planning, planning, and execution. It's important to know that this is not the only effective planning process. Some campuses may already have specific processes in place, and that's completely fine. This is just a way to provide you with another example of something that can work. So do what's best for you at the end of the day. We're not going to hold you to it. We just want to provide you with some additional resources. So we're going to go ahead and get started with ideation. Ideation, we're going to look at it in 3 different phases. So why, brainstorming, and research. Oftentimes boards just begin brainstorming ideas that they enjoy and build an event around that. While that can be great, have you ever gone to an event and left wondering, that was fun, but I didn't really gain anything from that, right? I know we've all experienced that. Sometimes different organizations put on things and you enjoyed it, you had a good time, but you didn't really feel the impact. So our goal is for your first step, instead, to turn your event into an experience, is finding your why. Who is your audience? How do you want your guests to feel during this event? How does this event fit into your organization's purpose, mission, and vision? This can be a little tough to figure out if this is not a practice that you're used to. So on the next slide, I'll be providing you with an example of how you can go about doing that, okay? So essentially the goal here is to plan backwards. So events that start off with a goal in mind tend to be more successful. Make sure you're upholding your missions. You found your why for your event, so now what? It's time to get brainstorming. So I'm also going to provide a list of brainstorming resources in the chat, so look out for that. But here are also some questions to get you critically thinking about before you just start throwing event ideas out. So what do you want to accomplish? What can you reasonably handle? And what are the major steps you need to accomplish and get your intended result? Sorry about that. Additional resources, like we are in a virtual time, how do we brainstorm virtually? People like Post-it notes and just writing, brain dumping things, those all work. But in a virtual format, that can be a little bit difficult. So some examples are Miro and Asana. Again, I'm going to be posting that link in the chat, but if you have any ideas also, feel free to do that as well. So our last step is our research phase, okay? So you've narrowed it down to a couple of different ideas. You've got your backups in your pocket. So how do you go about researching, okay? So has this event happened on your campus before? Is this an event that you host annually? Have other campuses done an event similar to this? Now that you have this network of peers, who can you reach out to and speak to about this? It's also important to think about, like, if you do really enjoy this event and you're passionate about it, what is that going to look like in a virtual platform? So that's definitely another aspect to think about during this research phase. Okay, so we're going to jump into finding your why. For those of you that are familiar with Merit's global events, and attended the NECA Live keynote, this may look a little bit familiar to you. Merit's was able to create a science-based, people-centered method to event planning. And one of the methods they developed was using design principles. So this practice of finding your why is rooted in the appeal of simplicity with your events. So how can you use this practice to find your why? This process allows you to really dig deep as to what you are actually trying to get across with your event. So let's consider the example on the screen here. Every year during homecoming, your board hosts a parade that's open to the community, members, alumni, students, and their families. At face value, 5 words that describe the event would be things like quality, leadership, community, excitement. Yeah, so those are great words, but you can dig in a little bit deeper, right? So what are 3 other words that describe your event that you haven't already used? This is where you would get things like human, progress, and energize. So you can see that we're getting closer to the real why of your event. But once you really dig deep and really consider what are 1 or 2 words that capture the entire essence of your event, we get something like belonging. The purpose of your event is to give the people attending a sense of belonging, which is significantly more powerful than something you would initially think about. Okay, so with that, we're gonna go ahead and jump into our first activity. So in a moment, we're gonna go ahead and do a couple of group activities. So for the first activity in our large group, I want you all to give an example of popular events. Some things like could be like a parade, a campus concert, a craft night, maybe a festival. To make sure we all have examples to share, we're gonna go ahead and use the chat feature for that, especially since it is a big group. We want everyone to feel heard. So we will be having another activity later, and we will be using these same event topics. So make sure it's something that you are actually passionate about and would like to explore a little bit more. In your small groups, you'll be assigned one of these brainstormed events. Using the event that your group gets, you will have about 5 minutes to complete the Find Your Why activity. And don't worry, the questions will be posted in the chat. After you find your why, make sure you select your spokesperson to share it out, because when we do get back into our big group, we're going to go group to group and figure out what your event was and what your why is. So we're going to go ahead and pause. We're going to go ahead and jump into our pre-planning phase. So pre-planning and ideation work hand in hand together and often take place at the same time. Before you can really dive into the fun details of event planning, you should definitely meet with your advisor to go over some important event constraints. That can include your budget, the time of the year the event is going to fall in. Does this fall during a major campus week of programming, things like homecoming, commencement, welcome week? Is this going to be a partnership or collaboration? Who on campus needs to know about this event and improve this event before you can actually get started? Additionally, you may need to complete program proposal forms though this varies from campus to campus, obviously these look different depending on what your campus needs are. Make sure you have a clear understanding of how the events are selected at your school to prevent any potential roadblocks for your planning. So for example, at Ohio State, our board, each committee prepares 9 to 12 different proposals with at least 3 that fall under our big 3 buckets of small, medium, or large events. So after our voting process, the board is super excited, but we still can't move forward until we receive approval from upper administration for ones that fall over a certain budget. Okay, does that make sense? So with that, we're going to jump right into our planning process. There are tons of different planning tools that exist. However, after learning about this design journey mapping during NACA Live, it's clear that this is a great way to really take your event to the next level and make it personal, immersive experience. So an audience journey map is a simple idea. It's a diagram that illustrates the steps your attendees and audience will go through in engaging with the event. There are 8 phases that fall into 3 distinct groups: pre-event, event, and post-event. During typical event planning, you will see that we typically focus on the entering and engagement phases, leaving much of the audience experience up to chance. To help you get a better understanding of each phase, we are going to use the example of an annual carnival you hold during family weekend. Okay, so we're going to jump into our first phase of announcing. Announcing is capturing your audience's attention. So that's your marketing piece, that's your promotional websites, that's you really figuring out who do you want to be at this event. So things to consider are, what can I do to build excitement around this event? How do I break through the noise and capture audience attention? Oftentimes you're not the only people programming on campus. So how do you make this event stick out? So thinking back to a carnival theme, have fun with the flyers. Someone should be able to look at the flyer and immediately get the nostalgic feeling that carnivals give people. So focus on the colors and activities that um, carnivals have going on. Create a hype video with highlights from the previous years. You can also do contests where students share images and videos of the previous year with a unique hashtag to keep building hype even before the event starts. It's also a good idea for something like this. A carnival typically has a bunch of different aspects to it. So what does it look like to create a bunch of different flyers that highlight specific aspects of the carnival? So I know a lot of times when we're promoting, you'll see that our social media feeds get clogged up with the same flyers over and over and over again, and people get tired of seeing that. So mixing it up is definitely going to build some excitement. For something like a carnival during family weekend, it's also a good idea to send over those promotional materials to campus partners. So reaching out to your alumni relations, your off-campus communities, your transient student services, and whoever is the department that hosts something like a family weekend. That's definitely a great start. So the attracting phase, you're really wooing the audience. So you're enticing them. You want them to be interested in going to this. So how do you do that? Do that through targeted marketing efforts, continuing to research your audience and wanting them to research you right back, and moving that audience to like really consider going to your event. Like, what are they getting out of going to your event, right? So some examples of how to do this on your campus are an on-campus scavenger hunt, if they're allowed, partnered with other campus officers so that they can find themed items and share that on their social media and win a prize at the end. Maybe it's during tabling, you have a mini carnival game where people can interact with that and get a feel for what they're going to get out of the event. And again, we mentioned on the previous slide, creating that unique hashtag, making sure that's on all your promotional materials so people can take that tangible thing with them and look at that at a later time. And you don't necessarily need to keep promoting it, if that makes sense. They're essentially doing the work for you. Our next phase is anticipating, so eliminating all disappointment. Your audience is excited. They're definitely coming to your event. They're excited to attend. You're setting them up for success by really showing them this is what you're going to get out of it. It's going to be a great time. Your life is going to be changed by attending this carnival. So an example of this is, it's a high demand event, right? So let's say this is something that people need to claim tickets ahead of time. How do you make that ticket release an event on its own? Do you have line contests where people can dress up in costumes, or where you have music playing or free food being given away to entice people to keep immersing themselves in this experience? So moving on into the during the event phase of the planning process, arriving. Arriving is an interesting part because this is an aspect we have no control over. So that's things like campus shuttles and parking, what's the weather like outside, any issues that they might have, maybe someone loses their tickets to get into the event, right? So how do we make this a little bit more enjoyable for people? So for a carnival, how can we make arriving more pleasant so that people don't want to not attend? A good start would be providing attendees ahead of time with the closest parking lot location, or what is the best bus stop to get off on so that they're closest to the venue. If it is a ticketed event, maybe sending those reminder emails ahead of time so that people remember the event and you're getting that additional touch point. So they're being reminded, oh yes, this is important. I need to do this. Entering. So I don't think we often think about making the entrance of an event part of the event, but it definitely is. That's the first impression people are getting of what you're doing. So how do you want people to feel fully immersed in the event before they're even actually inside? So add components of the event at the entry point of your doors, of your building, of your venue. So line control is definitely part of this event. How are you engaging guests so that they do get inside, they already feel special? So it's having that music at the entry point. It's having the carnival music playing outside so that they're getting excited and they already feel like they're part of the experience. It's also signage. A lot of venues have different entry points into where the event is actually happening. So how are you making sure people are going to the right area? So having signs on those other entry points saying like, this is the best way to go there, but it's also having that human interaction there too. So what does it look like to have a volunteer stationed at the back entrance and letting people know like, hey, this isn't the main entrance, but I can actually walk you over there if you're gonna have some issues getting there. So it's being a good steward at every single point. Engaging. This is where the fun begins. This is where we excel. I probably don't have to give you too much tips on this actually, but what does it really look like to engage people? Like, I know oftentimes for events, we'll have one big theme, right? Or one big piece that everyone's excited to come and participate in. But for a carnival, what does it look like to have a section of this is where our different games are, and this is where our performers stage is, and this is where the food is going to be located? Having that map laid out ahead of time so that people can kind of choose their own adventure clearly is important. It also gives people an opportunity to be like, wow, they took time to really understand, like, maybe I don't really care about the performers, and I'm really here for the activities, and I still feel like I'm part of the overall experience. And exiting. This is our final phase of during the event phase. So what are they leaving with? That last moment as you're walking out should be like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever experienced. This is what I'm going to remember about this event forever. So make that last moment memorable. If you do have performers, save the best, most engaging performer for last. Perhaps all the carnival games gave you a certain amount of tickets for every time you won. So what does it look like to have a major giveaway at the end so that people that got like the most tickets get that recognition piece, or your top 3 or something like that? You can get creative with it, but if you do have that like major giveaway at the end, it's also going to entice people to stay for the entire event. Following up with that, people don't really understand that closing remarks matter. Definitely making sure that you're including additional information in those closing remarks. We want people to feel like they got something out of this. So thank them for coming there. They took time to spend this evening with you. So let them know that you're thankful for that. But that's also a really good time to let them know of future events that are similar to this that they might also enjoy. And that way you're continuing to build that relationship with your audience. And last but not least, extending. So this is audience storytelling, memorabilia. They're getting that nostalgia feeling thinking about this event. So do you remember that hashtag you created all the way in the announcing phase where people could post their videos and pictures from the event? Do you see how this is coming full circle a little bit? If you did collect that student information, you can easily send a follow-up email like, hey, we're creating a recap video and we'd really love for you to share your pictures and videos so that we can make sure that future students or future event goers got to see the full picture, and that way they feel more a part of the event and would be more interested in going in the future and to future events overall. And on top of that, that'll also go back to your arriving stage for next year, since this is an annual event. So now that we have a framework for event planning, what else do we need to consider? I'm glad you asked. So event spaces reimagined. We tend to use the same events over and over again. So how are we intentionally immersing them into the event and transport them elsewhere? How are we appealing to all the senses to make it a full body experience? So Richard Mahler wrote an article for Campus Activities Program Magazine that is in your workbook. There's a link there. Definitely suggest that you read this after this presentation. And he did a great job of delving into this. Sorry for that jump. We are gonna jump back right over here. So our 5 senses are sight, taste, smell, sound, and touch. So how are we using these senses to immerse the audience? So starting off with something like sight, that can be in your decorations, it can be a background video. You have a little bit more flexibility with this. But again, still using that carnival example, what colors remind you of carnivals? it's the reds, it's the yellows, it's the whites. Include that in the decoration theme. For all your games, make sure the boards in front of it carry that signature. So when people walk in, they're like, yes, I know exactly where I am. This is making me feel like what it's supposed to. It can also be in the decorations you put on the walls or benches or posts. So we all know what those old-timey carnival flyers look like. What does it look like for you to create something like that with your mascot in it? So it feels a little bit more personal, but they're still getting that experience, right? So for something like smells, I don't know about you, but especially for food, smell makes me feel so good. It's a highly emotive sense and can quickly invoke memories from your past and bringing up that nostalgia. So for carnivals, it's a little bit easier. You can think of like the carnival foods. You'll instantly know the smell of like a funnel cake or an elephant ear, and it'll immediately bring you right back to where you're supposed to be. But let's think about something a little bit more difficult. Sometimes over the summer, we'll have something that's beach themed, or in the wintertime in our snowy states, it's like we want to not be in the cold. So let's reminisce about what it's like to feel like in the summer. So if you are doing a beach theme event, how do you use smell so that people feel like they're laying out, getting the sun, playing in the water? Obviously, you don't want the salt water smell taking over the room. But what about something like the subtle smells of coconut and pineapple? It'll instantly give you that tropical vibe and it won't be overbearing, right? Our next set is hearing. So again, this is a little bit easier. You can think of like the ambient sounds of the carnival music. I think that's a little bit easier to have in the background while you have like, you know, your top 40 playing over that. But another example of that is if you're having a city themed event. So you have a New York City themed event, you have the Eiffel Tower on the wall, and you really want people to feel like they're part of it. Having those ambient city noises in the backgrounds, like of the taxis and the trains, everyone that's been in the city knows that. It's calming for them, it's calming for me. So having that going is definitely going to bring people right to the event. They close their eyes, they feel like they're there. And that's what we want out of this. And last but not least, it's touching and feeling. So again, this is kind of similar to with our decor. It's in the props, it's in the decoration, it's in the furniture of the physical objects that are around. When we think of touch, we usually just think of our hands, but touch is a physical body experience. So for the carnival, this would show up in like our outdoor games. You know what those, what the ball feels like when you're trying to knock down one of those glass bottles or the rings. It's that nostalgia piece. So that's a little bit easier. But what about maybe seeing if you can bring in some of those, the outdoor benches that they have set up, or even hail bays. Like you are your own limit, so definitely don't feel like you can't be as creative as possible. But another example of this, let's say, again, we're doing that beach theme. How do we bring a beach inside? Maybe it's having like a small sand pit with some shells that people can like put their hands in as a relaxation moment or activity. Again, your own creativity is your only limit. Accessibility. Just as a friendly reminder, accessibility is a requirement for your event planning. It's not an afterthought, and it should be considered at every step of your planning process. So for this presentation, we're looking at accessibility in 3 different areas: marketing, physical space, and event content. But for a much more in-depth look at this, again, I included some materials in your workbook. Samra Ward did an amazing presentation called Access Palooza. It's on Encore. Highly recommend you look into it because it'll give you a much more in-depth look at what accessibility looks like in your event planning. So how are you making sure your event is accessible? Consider your physical space, but also how are you marketing the event and the actual content of the event? So for example, when looking at alternative text, yeah, we want to see your event descriptions and details, but also if you put all that time into the illustrations of your event flyer, make sure you're providing that to people that are using those image readers. Really delve into the colors, paint that picture for them so that they can also see what that flyer looks like, right? Color choice. This is important not just for color blindness, but it's also just a good measure for sensory, just for sensory disorders as well. Some colors can be jarring. Some colors are difficult to see together. Really being intentional about what you're picking so that it's easy to understand and get across what the message of your flyers are. Captioned videos for promotion. It's important not only for like our deaf and hard of hearing friends, but language barriers also exist. Again, processing disorders also exist. People can hear something and they won't get it, but once they read it, they're able to understand what the point of your message is. So being intentional about creating those different ways of getting the information is super important. Physical space, we talked about it a little bit just a moment ago as we're talking about physical space reimagined. But make sure that the spaces you're reserving are accessible early on, because I know in the past people have definitely run into issues where space wasn't accessible and then it caused them major headaches later on. So if your building doesn't have a smooth path to get into and it only has stair access, that's not an accessible space. That's not a usable space for an event. So being really mindful of things like that, but also seating arrangements. I think a lot of times our spaces are preset. We might not put down the chairs ourselves. So if we do have a full ballroom event and someone comes in a wheelchair, make sure you have a space for those students to sit, because it makes them feel not welcomed when you're just like, oh, I actually just have to move these chairs real quick, because at that point they know you didn't even consider them. And why would they even stay for the event at that point? As far as event content, it may be a little bit easier to make a speaking engagement accessible with captioning and translation. What about events where the focal point is a bounce house? When event planning an activity, when planning an event that's very activity-based, make sure you have multiple options so that people with various abilities are able to still participate and engage. So I know this is a lot of information, but now it's time to give you a shot at planning this event. So in your small groups, you are going to use the design journey map to plan the event that you were assigned earlier on. You'll have about 10 minutes to do this, so try your best to address each step at least once. And for your convenience, the entire plan is listed in your workbook, so don't feel like you had to have everything written out. That's not feasible, and I understand that. Choose a different spokesperson that you had earlier to share out what you planned, and specifically share at least one innovative aspect that you would not have otherwise considered. So we're going to take a quick little pause and then we'll get back to the presentation. Great. So now that we have our event planning, formats in place, we have a methodology, we are going to go ahead and figure out how we're going to organize everything, right? So the first step is to create your timeline for accomplishing each major task. Work out fine details for each major step by breaking it down big tasks into smaller, more manageable and digestible tasks. This helps with execution and delegation, and it also keeps you more organized and making sure you're actually ticking all the boxes and thinking about everything that you need to. Assign tasks to individuals. I know a lot of campuses work on committee formats, and your committee members can do anything you allow them to and they want to, so keep them engaged. That can be things like shopping for the event, writer shopping, flyering on campus, contacting organizations who may be interested in tabling during that event, and more. Again, your creativity is your only limitation. Give time limits and set deadlines. That's pretty self-explanatory, but it's important. Consider institutional timelines like safety clearances and catering. Sometimes if you don't get that stuff done ahead of time, you can't have an event. So be very mindful of when you need to turn things in so that you're still able to do what you want to do. And last but not least, put these details on a master calendar or create a checklist. This helps you with remembering who to hold accountable for what tasks. Now that we've completed the planning portion of our event, it's time to make it happen. So it's time to put your plan into action. What now? First things first, share your day of show with your board and your advisor. The point of this is not just to make sure everyone knows what's going on, but we know life happens and emergencies happen. So with that day of show, the point is that anyone that has that document should be able to make that event happen, even if you're not there. Okay, so make it as detailed as possible so that anyone reading over it knows exactly what to do. Be aware of possible obstacles and distractions. Things pop up on the day of that could delay your prep, and that's okay, but you need to keep pushing through. Work the plan that you made, but be flexible because stuff happens. Volunteer debriefs are important. I know we have them before, we implemented them after, but this is a time that allows people to ask clarifying questions and to all be on the same page, so that when you're going to set up your event, everyone knows exactly where there needs to be and there's no like clouded, I think I'm supposed to do this, but I'm actually not sure. Having them at the end is also super helpful because that way you're able to get that immediate feedback since the event is so fresh in their minds. And lastly, always have backup plans because nothing sucks more than being rained out of your movie on the lawn with no rain location. So some last minute considerations. Though it is showing up as a process, some of these steps may be occurring at the same time. For example, depending on your campus, you may need to do some pre-planning decisions with your advisor before you can even start ideating. Additionally, in the planning process, you might lose sight of your why and need to revisit that step to put you back on track. So with all of that being said, yes, event planning is definitely complex and daunting, but it doesn't have to be. The most important thing is to stay level-headed and organized throughout the process so that when event day does come around, it's smooth sailing. Good luck, you got this. And if you have any questions, please put those in the chat so we can go ahead and address all of that. You've all been great, and thank you.